Well, says Dyer, that's for the room to decide. The room reveals all. What you get when you step into that room, what you get is not what you think you want, but what you really wish for, what you most deeply wish for. And so now this disturbing epiphany is creeping up on writer and professor. What if they don't want what they think? What if the desires that they are conscious of, the ones in a sense that they've kind of consciously chosen, what if those actually aren't their innermost, deepest longings? What if in some sense their deepest longings are humming under their consciousness unawares? What if in effect they are not who they think they are? Well, how could that happen? What would make that plausible? How could it be that I don't know what I want? How could there be this gap and this disconnect between my conscious perception of myself and actually what I'm hungering and thirsting and craving for? Well, this is where I want to dive in tonight and try to explore why we might experience this tension and gap in our lives. And all of it revolves around an ancient philosophical notion of habit. So think of it this way. Imagine your loves, your longings, your hungers, your wants. I'm going to use all those terms synonymously, right? Your desires and your cravings. Imagine that your loves, like that, are habits, right? That your loves are habits. What's the significance of describing them as habits? Well, it's not, when we say habit here, we don't mean just these exterior routines that you go through. We tend to use the word habit for the kind of exterior rituals that we go through. So you might say, I have a habit of always putting on my left sock first, or so, which turns out to be true. But well, that's the routine. That's the ritual. That's actually not the habit in this sense. When we talk about habits, this is true, by the way, both in philosophy, and it's an ancient tradition in philosophy. Interestingly, we're going to see it's also the way to think about habit in contemporary social psychology, positive psychology, and even some accounts of cognitive science and neuroscience. Habit here is not just the exterior ritual and routine that you're going through. It is an acquired disposition. It's a kind of default orientation that you have learned and acquired that has become woven into the fabric of your character, so that now a habit, something that is habitual, something that has become habit, is precisely the kind of thing that you do without thinking about it. Does that make sense? So that something that is habitual is something that has become automated for you in a sense. It's something that has become, and this is the way Aristotle talked about it 2,000 years ago. He said a habit is something that has become for you second nature. We use that phrase, right? Sometimes you say, oh, that's second nature for her, which means what? She could not do that. That's the kind of person she is. Like that, it's so built into the fabric of who she is that she couldn't not be that way. It's second nature. Now, why call it second nature? Well, because in a sense it mimics first nature. What's first nature? First nature is biology, right? So think of first nature. Biology are all the kinds of systems and aspects of who we are that are humming along, operating without our thinking about it, so that we can sort of live and move and make our way in the world. So for example, all of us have been in here tonight successfully breathing without thinking, as far as I can tell, without thinking about it, right? I mean, now you're thinking about it, but you weren't thinking about it before. So what does that mean? Well, in a sense, nature, these biological dispositions that are wired into you, are taking care of a system so that you don't have to consciously, it's not like we've all been sitting here saying, inhale, exhale, right? You haven't been choosing to breathe. You don't have to be conscious and deliberate about it because it's taken care of by nature. Okay, if you get that, now what we're calling habits are like that, in the sense that they are ways of being in the world, they are ways of being oriented to the world, there are ways of acting that become defaults for you so that you are that way in the same way without thinking about it. You don't have to choose, you're not deliberating about it. The difference between first nature, biology, and second nature, these other habits, is that they are acquired and learned over time. They're not instinctual and built into the hard wiring of our biological systems, okay? How are we doing, all right? So, the first piece of the puzzle here is to realize that our loves, our longings, our desires, our cravings are much more like habits than they are like choices. Or at least on some significant register, our hungers and our longings and our cravings are a kind of heart habit, a disposition of who we are that is learned and acquired, and then becomes so woven into the fabric of our character that we become the kinds of people who act in this direction or pursue those ends, those things that we want, without thinking about it. It's automated.